So today we're talking about the new and revamped Dynastic codes and which ones might be the most useful for your Necrons. Hello and welcome back to Auspex Tactics, the strategy focused 40k channel where we've been digging through the 9th edition news and rumours as they come out. Today we're looking at the new Necron dynasties as previewed by Games Workshop. Basically in their video where they announced the Necron Codex and the Space Marine Codex, they gave us quite a good look at the new Dynastic codes, and it seems like most of them have at least seen minor changes since their previous incarnation in the 8th edition Codex. From the main Dynastic codes page it looks like there are 6 Dynastic codes now. In the 8th Codex there used to be 5, so these ones have included the Szarekhan dynasty, the one for the personal dynasty of the Silent King that all the Indomitus Marines are painted in. I found it quite interesting that there were only 6 of them. They have shown quite prominently on the Warhammer community page a couple of other dynasties with new paint schemes, including these warriors from the Xanathor and Zarakura dynasties. At the time I honestly thought they might be expanding them to give them their own unique rules, but it's looking like they might just have been an exercise in different ways to paint your Necrons. We don't know 100% that there aren't any custom dynasty rules, much in the same way that you can get custom successor chapters in Space Marines, or unique regiments for the Imperial Guard, so it's certainly not impossible that we might see some build your own dynasties, much in the same manner of these in the Codex. The way that Necron dynasties usually work is that everyone gets the bonuses unless they're a dynastic agent, such as the Triarch Praetorian or Triarch Stalker and Khatan Shards. Canoptek units generally do get dynastic benefits. I kind of wonder whether or not Triarch Praetorians and Stalkers might get the Szarekhan dynasty if they're included in a Szarekhan detachment. They are after all supposed to be representing the Triarch and are very much on the same side as the Silent King. I think that would be a cool little touch if they allowed it. Finally, there's another interesting little rule that was teased about protocols, and it sounds like there's at least 6 different protocols, and each dynasty gets additional benefits for being in one specific protocol that fits with their fluff. It's really not too clear what these are at the moment. I would guess that they're something similar to Space Marine combat doctrines or Admech Canticles of the Omnissiah, something like that. I strongly suspect that they might be entire army buffs that you can only use for one given turn. That's definitely not confirmed though, it might just be single unit buffs or even potentially stratagems. Basically each of the dynasties have a wording where they say that units that aren't Khatan Shards or dynastic agents can gain both effects whenever this protocol activates. That implies that each one has 2 parts to its buff, and under normal circumstances you'll have to choose one or the other. If that's really right, then it might give you a whole load of different options with which one might be the best for the given situation, and if they really are whole army buffs, that's going to be a lot of flexibility for the Necron army. I guess we'll have to wait and see. So let's get on to the Dynastic codes themselves then. First up we have Mephrit, which has been augmented slightly since its previous incarnation, and to be honest I already thought it was one of the more interesting ones. In 8th it basically makes your guns better when you're within half range, again an additional AP-1. So say if you're shooting away with some Gauss flares at the enemy at 12-inch range, they'd be buffed up to AP-2, could give some brutal close range firepower. In 9th this has got slightly better by gaining an extra 3-inch to all weapons ranges as well. I suspect that this would stack with the half range special rule, which means that say Gauss flares would be getting AP-2 anywhere up to 13.5 inches away. In any case, if you liked them before, then you'll like them even more now. We get the names for each one of their protocols that they're good with. Apparently they're good with the protocol of Vengeful Stars, whatever that does. Next we have Novokh, the close combat orientated Necrons, and honestly it looks like they might have got a slight nerf, at least in terms of damage output. Novokh are the close combat orientated Necrons. In 8th they got reroll all hits on the charge, or if they made a heroic intervention or things. Now instead of that they get +1 to their charge rolls, which does mean that they will get into the enemy with more reliability admittedly, which is no small thing whatsoever. But their damage buff is worse I think. Basically the AP of their melee weapon attacks is going to be better by AP-1 on the first round of combat whenever they charged, were charged or made a heroic intervention. It's still not a bad buff, but it's very skewed on being good with weapons with low AP. With units like those new Sautekh destroyers with very high AP power blades, they're really not going to care all that much by an extra AP-1, and against a lot of targets it will be completely not meaningful at all, say if you're fighting against orcs or enemies with high invul saves. This one's going to be far stronger on units like Flayed Ones or Wraiths who have low AP to start with, so I'd say a bit of a side grade here. They've really lost some damage output compared with gaining more reliability of making the charge. Still certainly not a bad pick for a close combat related Necron force. Next we have this all new Szarekhan dynasty, which has a 2-part bonus, the first one being a 5+ Feel No Pain type save versus Mortal Wounds, where you just roll the dice to shrug them off if you get them. Not bad, certainly against some armies, but really quite specific, and some armies don't even use mortal wounds whatsoever. The bit that I do quite like with them though is that they get to reroll 1 wound roll every time a unit shoots or makes a fighting attack. Naturally this is going to synergize best with units with a low number of high powered shots, where each rerolled wound roll will translate into quite a lot of additional damage. It's hard to go wrong with a flat damage increase across your entire army, and I'm sure things like Doom Scythe, Death Rays and Doomsday Arcs with their high powered shots will get on with this quite nicely. Their protocol is the protocol of the Undying Legions. Moving on, our next one is Nephrekh. These guys are the aggressively territorial ones, and in 8th edition these are the ones with the translocation beams who can teleport around the table very quickly. This one's become a bit different. Every single unit has gained a 6+ invul save, although unless you're just shooting at fairly light armoured Necron warriors with a 4+ save or something, then there aren't going to be tons of weapons where this is going to be meaningful. Besides that, they get their translocation beams. When a unit advances, they can choose to translocate, and that means they get an automatic advance roll of 6, and they can move over enemy units and terrain as if it weren't there, but unfortunately they can't shoot after doing this now. I believe that they could in the previous edition. It's kind of a bit annoying really. That extra mobility and ability to move over things is very nice, but perhaps one of the better uses of it were getting assault weapons in range, so it's a bit annoying that you're not going to be able to do that now. The auto-advancing 6 could be more helpful for things that can advance and charge. Hopefully that adaptive subroutine stratagem is still present in the new Codex, which can allow Canoptic Wraiths to do that, for example. Finally, you can also fall back and translocate over enemies in the same way. This is actually really quite helpful and can help you get out of a pinch. It means that if enemies are trying to wrap and trap your units, they're just not going to be able to, and you won't even have to spend the extra 2 CP for that desperate breakout stratagem. I'm not really sure it's the strongest dynasty, to be honest. It has 3 fairly weak buffs in my opinion, but at least it has acquired that invul save, I guess. To be honest, one of the main draws to them in the last edition was being able to teleport any units with their translocation crypt, so maybe that will still be the biggest draw. Next up we have Nihilakh, who are the aggressively territorial ones. In 8th edition they used to get reroll hit rolls of 1 in the shooting phase if they remain still in the movement phase, but this one's been completely rewritten. They now basically all get Obsec even if they aren't troops, and if they are troops or have objectives secured for another reason, then they count as 2 models rather than 1. It is going to be pretty hard to steal objectives from these guys, which could be pretty handy in the new missions to be fair. They've also got a second part of their tactic, which means that they ignore AP-1 weapons when they're in their own deployment zone. All of those weapons count as having AP0 instead. Much like the Salamanders type buff, it is useful against certain armies, although it's a little bit hit and miss. You could have armies that have tons of these things, or you could have ones that have absolutely none again. It's a bit annoying that you have to be within your own deployment zone to access that buff. It's not exactly the strongest in my opinion. Overall, from the traits alone, I think the Nihilakh are one of the weaker ones. Finally, we come to Sautekh, the standard silver and green Necrons that have Imatech the Stormlord, and again their trait has been completely rewritten. It used to be that they could advance and fire any weapons as assault weapons, so generally a bit more mobile if they needed to be. That's been changed a fair bit. First of all, they get to reroll failed morale tests, though to be honest Necrons do have fairly high leadership anyway, and morale in 9th edition isn't really quite as devastating if you're trying to mass up the warriors or something. The more interesting bit though, at least in my mind, is that now they can rapid fire their weapons up to 18-inch range. The range increase is pretty handy for Gauss Flayers or Gauss Blasters on Immortals, foot slogging up the board, and it's also very usable for the new Gauss Reaper, which means that they'll be able to rapid fire up to 14 inches, so max range. It is a bit annoyingly specific though. Only a very few Necron units are going to be able to benefit from this damage buff. I think Warriors and Immortals will be the primary beneficiaries. Death Marks it might help out a little bit, although they can usually deep strike within range anyway. Though I guess it could be pretty useful for the Gauss Flayer arrays on things like Ghost Arcs or Doomsday Arcs. It could allow them to stay back and stay safe just a little bit more, while still pumping out quite a lot of shots. So overall from the Necron dynasties, I think some have got stronger and some have got weaker, although it looks like Necrons might well have got stronger as an army, depending on whatever these protocols give. It still looks like Novokh are the way to go for a choppy Necron army, and then I think you're going to be debating between Mephrit, Szarekhan and Sautekh if you want to go down a bit more of a shooting route. At the moment I think I'd mainly just want to take Nefrekh for being able to deep strike any unit anywhere on the board, presuming that stratagem is still a thing, and Nihilakh to me just seems a little bit weak. Obsec is helpful, but it doesn't necessarily matter if you've already been shot off the board because your arm is not quite as strong. Still though, it'll be good to see what these new protocols give us, and also any other options such as warlord traits, relics and stratagems that might have been changed in the new codex. As always, I'm looking forward to hearing what you guys think of the rules down in the comments below. If there's anything that I missed or not considered, then please let me know. If you've enjoyed the video, then feel free to subscribe to Auspex Tactics. And if you'd like to help support the channel, I'd just like to mention that I do have a Patreon page, which is down in the video description below. The channel's Patreon is what allows these videos to keep on coming so regularly, so if you are enjoying then any support is massively appreciated. Channel Patrons get to see videos early each week, there's regular polls to see what sort of things come next for the channel, and it automatically enters you in the Auspex Tactics prize giveaway each month with the chance to win some really big model kits. It's 3 copies of the Indomitus box at the start of August. If any of that sounds good to you, or you'd just like to help keep the videos coming, then the link is down in the video description below. In any case, a massive thank you for listening, and I'll hope to see you guys next time.